Get this. So, Ryan Geertsen, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Ryan Geertsen. I got a lot of tweets from him, so I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He says this exchange is from 2021, a reminder of who Carney is, Mark Carney. The guy agrees with canceling pipelines in Canada, but uses his company to invest in pipelines all over the world. His climate agenda is about money while we get poor. And he's about to be grilled. Mark Carney's about to be grilled by Pierre Poilievre. Ironically, as Mark Carney is trying to get leadership in the Liberal Party and be the short-term prime minister, with his opponent, Pierre Poilievre, watch this exchange back in 2021 where Pierre Poilievre is going to grill Mark Carney about his business venture in his net zero policies, taking that money, taking the carbon tax money, and investing that in pipelines all around the world while we suffocate with these endless taxations. Listen to this.
Do you support the Prime Minister's decision to veto the Northern Gateway pipeline, Mr. Carney?
I understand the veto of the Northern Gateway pipeline.
Do you support it?
Given both environmental and commercial reasons.
Do you support it?
I think it was sensible. I wasn't involved in the decision, but I think it was the right decision. And
yet your company has invested billions of dollars in oil companies in both Brazil and the UAE to buy pipelines. You bought billions of dollars of pipelines as a company in the last 5 years.
So Pierre Poilievre, looking like an IRS agent, I'm glad he took off the glasses and went to contacts. He's stating that Mark Carney, with his investment firm, his business, took the money from Canadians, claiming to be for net zero policies, which we know about what net zero really is. We know how dangerous it is. Took those climate change agenda policies and invested that into Brazil and UAE pipelines. So he took the money away from Canadian fossil fuels and invest that into other fossil fuels in other countries. How does that make you an environmentalist? How does that make you a climate activist? How are people going to trust you about climate change and net zero-ness when you take the money and invest it in fossil fuels anyway? And amazingly, they're trying to hide this video. They're trying to hide this video away from the public because Mark Carney, who's now running for Liberal leadership, doesn't want you to notice this. Doesn't want you to know how much of a hypocrite this guy is. And Pierre Poilievre is grilling him hard on this.
Do you support those investments?
Mr. Poilievre, there is a global energy system, and one of the issues, I'm trying to explain a bit of how the economy works. One of the
Thank
issues,
you so much.
It may help. One of the issues for this committee in thinking about a sustainable transition.
Do you support it?
Where is Canada's role?
So Pierre Poilievre is asking the simplest question: Do you support cutting the pipeline extension from Alberta to the other provinces? You support that, yes or no? Mark Carney is stalling. Mark Carney says, "Oh, let me tell you something about economics for a second. Let me tell you about the global markets." Which Pierre Poilievre's like, "Yeah, thank you. He, as running the Conservative Party, needs the crash course on global economics and economy of Canada." Yeah, the dumb guy here needs the crash course, needs the master class, from the outsider. The inside outsider. Remember? Such a great guy this man is.
In those as energy transitions from fossil fuels to renewables, and in different jurisdictions, into different geography, it matters. Okay. And this is a fundamental point.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. This is a fundamental.
But he goes into jurisdictions because, hey, if I can invest in Brazil and UAE, they have different law structure than we do. So, while our government is destroying Canada with its violations, with its crummy laws, at the ethics probe, I'll just go invest elsewhere because they relax their laws. They don't care. I'll just invest in other territories. I'll invest in their energy.
So I'm sorry, you've
finally
exceeded
getting
the
to
time.
a point
You've
that
exceeded the
is
time.
relevant to this committee's inquiry.
What you're saying is you oppose pipelines in
pathway?
Canada, but you support them in the UAE and in Brazil. That's what you've actually said.
There are specific.
That's your double
pipelines.
standard.
It is not a double standard.
It is a double standard.
No, it's not.
You make billions of dollars off foreign pipelines, and you shut them down here at home, putting our people out of work.
You that you are a representative of the Canadian people, and one of your.
And this is the same guy who not only shuts down the pipeline, putting people out of work, but this is why gas prices are extremely, extremely detrimental. You go to the pumps right now. I think today it was like, I'm not sure about today, but recently it was like $1.53 at the pumps. It also went to $2 per liter during the summer months because of people like him. And then on top of that, this is the same asshole who tells you the carbon tax is too low. So he's going to make it unaffordable for you people. But it's okay because that money is going to go to my company and I'm going to use that to produce energy overseas because they relax their laws. And I'm going to tell you something about economics. So yes, it is a double standard. It is definitely a double standard. And he's telling it right in front of your face. And that's why they're trying to hide this video. Because they don't want the public to know what a hypocritical asshole, a douche this guy is. The insider outsider, the former governor Bank of England and Canada, who even the Prime Minister of UK, Liz Truss, doesn't trust him.
Responsibilities, including at this committee,
is to fight for Canadian jobs, and not foreign jobs like you.
Exactly, to fight for Canadian jobs, and the types of Canadian jobs that are durable and are going to move forward.
Right.
I grew up in Alberta. I know the innovative nature of that.
Well, go try to give that answer back in Alberta, because I grew up there too, and I can tell you the people. I can tell you the people of Alberta would be ashamed with the answer you just gave. That you would give billions of dollars to foreign pipelines, while not allowing Canadians to build pipelines here at home. That is the kind of elite Davos hypocrisy.
Could I please,
Madam Chair? This is really unbecoming of a member to badger any witness. This is really, truly unacceptable.
Okay. Now they're like, oh, you're talking inappropriately. This is a parliamentary session. You got to speak like you're in the House of Commons. But Pierre Poilievre is right. And I just love how these elitist scumbags, considering the fact that Mark Carney has three different citizenships. 3. I love how they go into, well, as a guy from Alberta, like Kamala Harris saying, I grew up middle class. That doesn't do anything. All that does is show what an asshole you are, not only to sell out Canadians, but to sell out your own province where you apparently came from. Like, how is that a winning argument? Well, I came from Alberta, and I understand that cutting out the pipeline and cutting out our energy resources is so beneficial to Canadians. Well, I invest that money overseas. Flourishing my company is going to make Canada sustainable. And that is the double standard that Pierre Poilievre is addressing right to his face. And right when the moment gets heated, settle down. Now you're badgering the other plaintiff. Oh God, So This article really explains it. This is from a place called Unearthed, which sounds less like a publication and more sounds like a show that William Shatner would be on. Unearthed on the History Channel. Ah! I would actually watch that. I would watch it. Carney's net zero investment firm has billions in coal and oil sands projects. Billions. What billions? Our billions. Us. We paid for it. And they send it overseas to other countries and their fossil fuel projects. So it shows you that all these climate alarmists like Mark Carney and Al Gore and even Greta Thunberg are all showing their true colors, that they really didn't give a damn about the environment. And if they did give a damn, they wouldn't be doing this. They'd be cutting the carbon tax. They'd be investing in clean, reliable energy for all Canadians. They'd be listening to a damn word from what Davos has to say. The UN Climate Finance Envoy said Brookfield, which he joined last year, is a net zero across its portfolio. So it goes on to say a Canadian company that employs UN Climate Finance Envoy Mark Carney as vice chair has invested billions of dollars in fossil fuel projects, including a coal port and an oil sands pipeline. Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, is now Boris Johnson's finance advisor for the COP 2016 climate summit, in addition to his high-profile role for the UN. Just remind people, this is from 2021. This is from February 2021. He joined Brookfield Assess Management last August with special responsibility for environmental, social, and governance issues. Earlier this month, Carney told Bloomberg TV that Brookfield is net zero across its $575 billion asset portfolio. He said that although Brookfield owns companies across the spectrum, it has achieved net zero status because we have this enormous renewables business that we built up and all of the avoided emissions that come with it, while investing in fossil fuel companies. Again, double standard right off the bat. You claim to care about emission standards, but you're paying to keep the emissions going. Just like how all these billionaires are buying carbon credits to keep their jets flying so they can pollute more. If they really cared about the planet and practice what they preach, they'd be getting rid of their jets. They'd be getting rid of their yachts. But an unearthed analysis has identified 5 major fossil fuel infrastructure projects in which Brookfield is a leading shareholder, including significant projects in the highly polluted coal and oil sands sector. Bill Hare, director at Climate Analytics, an NGO, warned that offsetting fossil fuel projects against avoided emissions, as Carney appeared to do, was not a reasonable definition of net zero. The fossil fuel projects identified by Unearthed are, I'm not going to read all of this, but I'm just going to read off the titles here. So oh my God, I don't even know how to pronounce that. The Dalrymple Bay Coal Port in Australia. The Natural Gas Pipeline Company of America. The Inner Pipeline in Canada. So look at it, he does invest in pipelines in Canada. Mr. Net Zero, Mr. Environment. That's why you got to pay more in taxes, because it's going to help the earth. The Abu Dhabi Natural Gas Infrastructure. The East-West Pipeline in India. A spokesperson for Brookfield, citing this shareholder letter told Unearth within the envelope of net zero carbon, we will continue to own and operate certain essential infrastructure assets globally that transport fuel. Brookfield wrote to its shareholders that it operated these assets with their contributions to the transition to net zero carbon in mind and with other plans to ensure they're consistently doing better. The company added, we believe the operating experience we have gained in transitioning from carbon intensive to net zero carbon ourselves will make us better owners of many of these assets. Hours after Unearth and Bloomberg stories had prompted an outcry on social media, Carney issued a statement in which he reiterated his support for net zero science-based targets, which he said avoided emissions do not count towards. So, the statements that he preaches to Canadians, which, by the way, we know that net zero is actually dangerous. We know that net zero carbon elimination is destroying life, and that we need carbon dioxide to flourish, to make things greener, to flourish crops. We know that there's a greening effect with the amount of carbon in the air. That greening effect is going to produce oxygen, which makes it beneficial for us. And if you really cared about the environment, you'd be planting more trees and not listening to Bill Gates, who wants to cut it down. He wants to cut down the trees and bury them in the name of science, in the name of climate change. So here's another, this is an even more interesting point. Wolfgang Kuhn, Director of Financial Sector Strategies at NGO Share Action, and not just Wolfgang Puck's alias when he goes to join Star Trek, told Unearth, and I highlight this part, net zero is quickly becoming a useless concept. Let me say that again. Net zero is quickly becoming a useless concept. According to who? According to this NGO. According to the people funding this. That they're saying net zero is useless. That all the money that we're taking from taxes, the carbon rebates, the whole scheme of the carbon taxes that's going to reduce emissions is a useless concept, according to the billionaire class. But yet Mark Carney demands to increase that to Canadians. Every time it is brought into play to justify the continued financing of carbon emissions, it becomes a little more hollow. There is no netting when it comes to the carbon budget. A ton of carbon put in the atmosphere is a ton of carbon in the air. Generating energy, even if renewable, does not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So is it absurd to say that the investments of this nature offset investments in fossil fuel infrastructure, the concept of avoided emissions, has no place in a Paris-aligned strategy. So this guy, Wolfgang Kuhn, who is the chief strategist for an NGO, Share Action, just discredited the whole movement behind carbon taxes, behind net zero, that it is physically impossible that you charging and getting finances to get carbon out of the air is impossible. It's unattainable. And all that you do is generate money to yourself. That even if you invested that into the green technology, even if you invested into renewables or build those contraptions that take the carbon away from the atmosphere, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to do anything, which is exactly the point of all this. Net zero And this whole green money laundering scheme is a scheme. Look at the documentary that Michael Moore put together. What was it called? Planet Earth, or not Planet Earth. Something along the lines. Where he said in that documentary, he pointed out that the green energy was actually a manifestation from the billionaire class to invest into their NGOs that do nothing beneficial to the environment. Nothing. That's why they're getting their advice from Bill Gates and not a farmer. A farmer who is one with nature, who has the oldest occupation with nature. That's why they're demonizing farmers and putting industrial plants to artificially process meat, to 3D print meat, instead of doing the natural way. The natural way that's been done for generations. So here's Mark Carney tweeting this out. This is back in 2021. He tweeted this out on the critical role of renewals and science-based targets in winning the race to net zero. Please see my statement. So this is when he was entering. This is when he became part of Brookfield. Getting out of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, now going into the private sector. But this guy's supposed to be an outsider. That's what he told Jon Stewart. He's an outsider. That's why Canadians trust me. So, I'm not going to read all of this, but it says, I'm proud to have joined a company that has committed decades of experience and tens of billions of dollars to advance renewable energy across global electricity grids. To be clear, I've always been and always will continue to be a strong advocate for net zero science-based targets. Well, if you look at the science, net zero is not beneficial. That's what science tells you. That's what nature tells you. That's what basic biology tells you. And I will recognize that avoided emissions do not count towards them. I also recognize that we need to rapidly scale renewable power to replace fossil fuel generation and further expand electricity capacity so that we can eliminate as quickly as possible the over 70% of global emissions that come from final energy demand. But he took the money to go towards fossil fuels in other countries. So, what this is telling me is that Canadians have to suffer and have to deal with more carbon taxes to flourish his company, to enrich and power other countries that are going to flourish more of his company. This is a Ponzi scheme. This is a Ponzi scheme to the next level. And now this guy wants to run for temporary prime minister and next leader of the Liberal Party. Here he is, just recently, to tell you that the carbon taxes are too low to benefit that company, to benefit his own private company, that you need to pay more in carbon taxes. And he's going to lie right to your faces in why we need to increase it. Listen.
Now, so far, carbon prices have been applied sparingly. They've been set far too low, in the single digits on average globally, well short of the estimated $80 to $100 a ton needed by the end of this decade to keep us on track to net zero.
Needed till net zero. I'm assuming that net zero means net zero bank account. Because the more we pay into this scheme, this Ponzi scheme, the more it's going to affect your finances. The more it's going to affect how much it's going to cost to fill up your car, to go to work, for your groceries. Because it's all a domino effect. This carbon tax scheme is a domino effect. Because it's going to affect the manufacturers, suppliers, the stores, the people, every which way. But he's okay with this. He's okay because that money goes towards this private company that he's going to then invest into fossil fuels to create more emissions to flourish more of his company. It's all a goddamn scheme. And this guy wants you to believe he's an outsider, according to what he said on Jon Stewart's show. I'm an outsider that wants to take more of your money to flourish his own private company after desperately after destroying the Bank of England, after decimating that country, after getting financial advice that almost ruined this country. He wants to run for liberal leadership to further flourish himself, to further flourish the globalization efforts that decimate on countries like Canada and Canadians, to further private entities and NGOs. To which point NGOs are even calling this out. NGOs are even calling this out. Net zero is a waste. It's not possible. So why are we doing this? Why are we allowing him to even for a second give this a thought?